One thing I'll ask on what you just said there is, on Summoning Insight, I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, we had a discussion where Monty said that classic topic, but it's come round again. He thinks actually Renekton is mega over-indexed in all these drafts. Like, if you look at the drafts, especially in like Europe, bro, everyone seems to think it's like the ultimate champion. Like, if people know the history of the champion Renekton, it's one of the most notorious like scrim stompers, where it just wins the first like 10-15 minutes. And then if you don't know, the problem with scrim culture in the West is you tend to just quit the scrim if you're getting super shit on. So that's why famously the best example is someone like the player Bo from Jungle. It's not a joke. Those stories are true, that he like mega wrecked all the scrims, but you can see why he didn't win any LEC games, because in an LEC game you still have to play out the game and close it, and he wasn't that great at late game macro, if you notice. So essentially I think there's a comparison to be brought here, right, Jensen, because you saw in this final, Fnatic just has it in their head that like Renekton is the shit, like they just want it all the time. But I actually think this final shows what Monty meant. Like, they had their leads, they were fed, but they could never do anything with this fucking champion and end the game. Like, if anything, it actually became like a liability at some point in time. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Renekton has always had a very bad rap, right? It's one of those things where it's criticized as this champion that falls off in the later stages of the game. And I think that it saw some redemption when people start to flex it mid for a certain period of time. Then it gained this duality, right? In terms of its flexibility, in terms of the roles that it could be played in. So when people go for Renekton, what they are trying to go for is they're picking up, they're trading out scaling and stats, right, in exchange for agency, because the empowered W, which is the stun, is so
Yep.
long, it guarantees so many setups, and it's
Yes.
actually very good when you're playing a two-lane pick composition, right, which is not the type of style that Fnatic likes to play. But if you're trying to play and repeatedly dive someone on the side lane, especially with AP junglers, which has always been a very classic pairing with Renekton, be it Nidalee or now with the Brand and Zyra, it's almost a true setup into whatever burst combo that's coming through from the AP mage. And that's probably why people are indexing hard into it, where they get these AP mages fat and ahead in the game. I think we saw that with some of, I think it was BDS's games as well with the Talia. That was one of those things that I recall used to terrorize scrims as well, right? Renekton Nidalee, Renekton Talia. They would just pick these champions, and the game would be over in 7 minutes because people would just quit because the top lane had died 4 times to the combo. And the problem is that the champion has got no multiplicative stats, right? So it's not like any of the tank champions where you gain this utility in the later stages of the game, and your utility as the game progresses is whenever you're flash active, you charge up enough rage, and then you go in on a flashless AD carry. So how you manage your flash and your ability to go in there to pick off AD carry in a key team fight is going to be the key factor in terms of how you use Renekton. And other than that, he also serves as a strong duelist on the side lane. Problem with being a strong duelist on the side lane is that currently the meta is all about these AD carries mid with a lot of mobility already. So you don't have the natural tanky stats where if you see one of these AD carries hitting the Ornn, you're just kind of tickling them. But the AD carry starts to wail on you, right? And if you E towards him and they have the dash, they time it properly so that you don't get into range of your stun, then you end up in a whole world of hurt. So he no longer fulfills that role as a duelist in the side lane where he's able to generate the side lane pressure as well. Yes, he can create some creative cheeses by sitting in bushes. And then once again, I would say it's also a little bit flash reliant for you to go in there and then do that. If you use the flash for that, you then don't have the flash available for the team fight, right? So this is the kind of the flaw of the problem of Renekton in this current meta. Whereas compared to when you're playing in a mage meta, the mages are a little bit weaker in terms of side laning, and then the Renekton, if you can find a mage on the
Yes.
side lane, then that's the one shot, right?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious angle, we can get to this a bit later. It's actually one of the reasons I also think LEC looks really bad, is LEC as a region is the one that looks terrible when you put ADCs all over the fucking map. Like, when you have 4 to 5 ADCs in a game, we're not, like, our regions can't handle infinite damage going in on the fight. Like, everyone's lost. So, no, I know what you mean. And that's also, to me, why it's so inappropriate right now. Because if you look at the fucking comps that you're playing against, as you say, first of all, this isn't the time when the Renekton's going to be the side lane god. There's just going to be some stud mid laner with 7 kills comes and just fucking wrecks you with 2 items. Like, you're never going to win that fight. And then secondly, just look at the draft for game 1 of this final and you'll see why some of these Renekton picks are mad egregious. So think about this pick, right? So Oscaridin has the Renekton here, guys, and he's playing into Kennen. The jungle on the other team is Sejuani. Mid lane is Corki. Bot lane is Ezreal and Poppy. So think about those 5 champions, right? If he goes to Kennen, Kennen already has an escape. Yike has the fucking easiest CC of all time to land when the Renekton comes in with that flash fucking E or whatever. Like, when he comes in like that, you're just going to instantly throw that ult in his face. It's going to be so easy, and you're dead instantly, by the way. Corki can obviously just jump away. Ezreal can just move away. And the fucking Poppy can just hit you over the other side of the map. Like, if you're the Ezreal, if you're the Renekton, because remember, you have to put yourself in the perspective, guys, here of the top laner. Imagine in your solo queue game, you're trying to get off, like, either the most amazing, like, flash engage, or you're going to do the flank, right? How are you ever going to get to any of the targets here? How are you ever going to get to, like, Caps or fucking Hansama? You're never going to. It's like, unfortunately, like, they have all the tools in the world to just fucking wreck you. So that's not, look, that's only a very minor issue with this final, but I thought we should do some, like, real, like, draft analysis before we get into the bigger picture stuff. Because, bro, one of the most criminal things about this final for me is I can't believe that Fnatic had those types of leads, though. Like, this is where I've always thought the most overrated stat in League is the gold advantage, because it brought, ever since we got out of, like, 2013, the question always becomes, but where is the gold? Not how much gold is there? Like, yeah, if you go back to, like, 2012 and 2013, when people played very basic win lane, win game, and just group a team fight and fight around Dragon and Baron, the most easy version of League of Legends ever, yeah, back then, raw, like, I mean, even used to just be 5k. 5k gold advantage is very hard to overcome in that meta. Like, you'll almost certainly win the game off that. But if you look in the modern day, my questions are always things like, where are the kills? What items were you able to buy with those things? Do you have the power spike yet, etc.? So sometimes you can have that, like, 3k gold lead that's not a real lead yet, or it's not actually, there's the other way to say it, it's a lead, but it's only on the scoreboard. It hasn't yet affected you in the game. It's not actually making them beat you. Bro, the leads they had, Fnatic, in these games, they were crazy leads. Like, they had the leads where you have exactly the players you want fed, your whole team's ahead, their key carries don't even have the kills, and you essentially have map control. Like, you can just choose to take the objective fight or do the fight. You can just, but bizarrely, I always think this is how you know Fnatic must be mindfucked against G2. Even when they had all of those win conditions, I've just all those strengths to have in a game, they almost played like they were the team behind Jensen. Like, they would accept, like, a stupid 5v5 fight in the middle of nowhere, like, or they would take a fight when you could have just gone and taken, like, a Soul or a fucking Baron or something. This is the most weird thing of all to me. Is like, it's almost like they just misplayed completely what their comp was or their winning situation. Give me some thoughts. Like I say, I've almost never seen a throw this bad, bro, because it's almost like they sabotaged themselves. Like I say, I don't even feel like G2 forced them to lose these games. What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of okay. So let's try to break it down first, right? Like converting map control leads into wins is. I don't think that that's evident Fnatic's strength. Right? This
Sure.
has always
Yeah,
been a
yeah.
team that's been about using player quality to beat people over the head with, and it's usually around the mid lane and in team fighting. So I think that there was a lot of we put some positivity into this. I think that there was a lot of very creative use of tactics that G2 was using. So they identified
Okay.
that Oscar was going to be the one who's trying to sneak out the waves, and I think they caught him once out around the bot lane bush, and then that helped them stabilize the map quite a fair
Okay.
bit. There was all these camps on the side lanes. I think that they picked up Humanoid Solution once as well using that. So there was a lot of good tactics coming through from G2, right? And this is where G2 has always been the master of their craft, right? And this is even back to the old G2 lineup. This is where they made their bread and butter when they were doing this against the likes of T1 and Dumb Gaming all the way back in 2019, right? Where they would fall behind and they knew how to overload through sides, find these creative picks around the side lanes, and then give up map control for a gambit to sit in the bush, pick up somebody to then regain even more map control in those scenarios. So to get back to my point with regards to Fnatic, so I think that it's one of those where there's definitely has to be a certain sense of frustration, right? From their perspective, where it feels like we're not being able to make progress on the side lanes. So in fact, they even did they did pull off some creative picks at some points of time. But it's quite clear to me that the protocols in terms of how do you create the signs of that to replicate that consistently wasn't necessarily there. And if your experience throughout the entire split has been beating people over the head in mid lane, and that's where they found the most of their success, then that's what I think they're going to try to default to, right? Especially if they have the likes of the Zyra, if they have the likes of what they feel is a range advantage, then they can try to hold that against G2 and then try to beat them in a 5v5 fight in those scenarios.
Yeah, I have to say one player that I'm going to pick out from Fnatic to highlight isn't even going to be the usual cast. Since I normally rave about Razork. I actually do think, I always say, I think Razork is actually the second best player in the whole LEC. I think Caps is first, but after that, I would pick Razork. If we're doing a draft, you take Caps, I'll take Razork second. You can have whoever you want third. Like, I actually think that would be the best choice. I think he's that good. And I think this year, he's actually been really fucking good. Like, yeah, he had the odd playoff game where he let them down. By the way, their team in general has been a nightmare up and down in playoffs throughout the year. But here's the problem. In this final, I think also he played really badly. Like in all contexts. Like he did have leads, which normally I would expect him to close out. Like he's normally at the tip of the spear. Secondly, bro, he had all the mega strong meta champions. He had 2 Zyras and a Brand. If you don't know, guys, these champions fucking dominate if you're a really good jungler right now. Like you can do so much with these. So he also had the picks. It's not like he was like denied his picks or they picked like 4 things, like people gave him actually powerful tools. And then lastly, I do just feel like even when Razork's really good, I can sort of forgive when he makes a mistake because he's one of those people on that like Yamato kind of, proactivity versus precision thing where he clearly goes for loads of proactivity, doesn't he? He tries to have loads of moves. But, so I can forgive the odd mistake because essentially that premise goes, you're not going to be as precise, it's not execution as much. His execution was crap in this one. What did you think of that angle, the Razork thing? Because if they'd have won, I was going to big him up. I was like, wow, he won with such a bad team and he's so insane, but he didn't. He actually was one of the problems in the game for me.
Stuff was fine. I don't think it was a particularly big issue because my analysis of the game really came down to a difference in tactics and the decisions to fight. And the criminals in those fights were, I think the big one that comes to mind was Noah. I
Of
think the
course.
Razork, there were some small mechanical mistakes, but if we are trying to nitpick, there were some very egregious mistakes from both teams in that one, right?
Sure.
Probably contributing to why so many people pen the finals as a whole, right? But I think that this is what happens when you have a high level of activity and just teams just going at it and trying to abuse differences in flash windows across the board. Where this is one of the things that I think people don't talk about enough when they look at junglers, right? Where what you have is what we call match versus mismatch jungle potting, where if both junglers path down in the same direction, that's what we call match jungle potting. Usually you have a lower level of activity unless you are both putting towards what's seen as a high volatility lane, which is actually what happened in game 3 of the series, where the Leona against it was Astral Leona against Kaiser Nautilus. Then they got a solo kill in the early levels, and all of a sudden the junglers are going to be appearing in the same places at the same time, with supports that can enable fights from both junglers rather easily and increase this high level of volatility, right? And there's these sort of situations where it's very hard to make a judgment and it's easy to criticize, right, when you see that people mess up the fights and stuff
Sure.
like that, but it's hard. This is why jungling is such a tough role. It's very easy to look at it and say that, okay, in theory, this is where the wave state should be, this is what's supposed to be happening, but now that one side has got a kill, right, the opponent support has reset, they're running out through mid, you know that there's going to be all this information that's available to you, and it's different from what should be a default standard game, right? Or in chess they call it a theory game, right? That has been thrown out the window. We're in new territory altogether. You have to reinvent how you're going to be playing and adapting to the situation at hand. You need to have a very good read as to what the game state is going to be. And I don't have a lot of fault as to how Razor played that, at least in the earlier stages of the game. And when it comes to the mid game in terms of his execution, prioritizing the objectives was mostly fine. It's really just how the team moved around the map and their choice to push mid when they shouldn't be pushing mid, their inability to defend the side lanes, and how they got picked off in some of those scenarios where they would split 2-1-2, even sometimes in those scenarios where I think that's where I'm not even sure where the source of those calls are coming from. Is this still a team that is dominated by Humanoid or Razork in terms of the calling in the mid game, or is this something more of like June taking over? What has the process been like? And that's where my brain goes to when I try to break down how exactly did this team fall apart in the mid game, and why is it that they're not able to convert on these leads?
No, that's fair enough. What about one thing I did want to ask about, because I do think this is insane, is it's funny that everyone is now on the like fuck Noah train and they all hate him and think he's trash. He should be out for that all the time. Because what's hilarious is if you ever go and look, he almost did the reckless completely. Like he did the thing where the actual box scores look totally fine. If you actually looked at the box score, you would actually, your initial assumption would be he must have played well and the rest of the team shit the bed. Like what I would say about like upsetting Carmine Corp or something, you know. Like, but I have to say, if you ever watch him in these games, bro, first of all, here's where he did not do the reckless. Reckless doesn't just play like Ezreal and just get caught right out in the open and lose the whole game. Like, the fuck? If anything, when I criticise Reckless, it would be like he was too passive, he stepped back, he didn't go for the extra kick, he wouldn't flash in, he wouldn't... Like, put it this way, the reason why Reckless's whole gameplay went away is because he, in an era where you can flash and Gale Force, he's a totally inappropriate ADC. Like, that's not his style. Bro, Noah, like, simultaneously, like, made missteps and died, and then also had the fights where he just wasn't doing anything. It's like, bro, you're all the kills, everything's on you. Like, basically, in this scenario, this isn't like when Flackard used to play for G2, and everyone used to hate on him, but he was clearly like the tertiary carry. Like, he wasn't even given the picks or the fucking resources. They had the resources in this guy. Like, this guy, if you were, the obvious angle a lot of people have said, but I just start thinking of how many ADCs in this league would carry these games given that lead. I think there's a lot. I'm not going to say like it's an awesome league for ADCs, but you know what? As much as I might criticize someone like Super from Mad Lions, bro, he would carry these games. If you put him into, like, if you pause at that, like, 4K, 6K, 8K gold lead in these 3 games for Fnatic, and you put in Super instead of Noah, I think they would win the game. I'm being serious. Like, I actually could trust him to carry the game and not make, like, some stupid blunder and just throw the whole thing. What did you think on that aspect? Because I don't want to make it totally hating on him, because you don't want to take that for this episode. I guess it's not your style. But he had a lot of bad players in this final, right?
Yeah, I mean, the one that definitely comes to mind is the part where he eats forward onto the corky, right? And he tries to get the chunk in. And uh, if I'm looking at it from a team perspective, it looks like a tragedy of miscommunication. Okay, okay, that there is 2 layers to this. Firstly, even if the Renekton commits the flashing goes in with him, I still think it's a bad play, right? Maybe he trades himself for the corky, but then he and Renekton are in a compromised position from that spot.
Right.
So it's probably not the right angle to go for. But what's more telling from that is that he and the rest of the team are not on the same page. And I think that this has been clear, like just watching the way that Fnatic has been team fighting, especially with Noah and Ezreal. It's very particularly on Ezreal, but I feel that he doesn't seem to get the concept of this champion in team fights, right? It always feels like he's either one bound too far behind or he's using the E too aggressively. I'm thinking about one where the team has full control of the choke and he's across the Dragon Wall in a position that's just needlessly too safe. And then once the fight breaks out, he's forced to E forward and then he gets picked off as a result of that. So it's one of those things where I feel that the team hasn't really drilled on how to really team fight with this champion. And that's where I feel that it's telling, right? Because it's on the same champion where he has repeatedly had his issues. Maybe it's one of those things where if to take it in a cynical way from the coaching perspective is okay, if we are not going to understand how this champion works, I know that we have been having lots of success with it in the laning phase, maybe we just drop it, right?
Yep.
I get that Ezreal is one of the strongest champions in the game right now, especially with the strategy of batting 380 carries.
I mean,
right?
the joke is you should probably just let Caps play it, you know, since we can play it mid as well, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can also do that, right? Because by the way, one thing, it's like more of a philosophical coaching thing, but maybe you'll vibe with it, is one thing that comes from the world of coaching, how you model the game, how you think about it when you're in different perspectives, is I feel like there's 2 obvious angles I would say to Fnatic here that would really help them as a coaching lens to apply. So one, when they had all these leads, there's a concept that I actually took from a guy called DDK in Counter-Strike, if you know him. He's a British commentator who's the colour commentator, etc. And he phrased it the best way possible, which is when you're in a winning situation, apparently this is what people do in like games like chess, etc. What you do is when you're in a winning situation, one thing you should do is you do a quick like sort of assessment of the situation in the game, and you ask yourself very quickly, what would be the most obvious way I could lose from this situation? And then you're just cognizant of the fact, so for example, if you have a certain lead, like we were talking about BDS, then it might be like, don't get caught in the side lane. If we can just keep playing this out with this lead, I can only go a little bit in, don't every now and then just give up a wave if I need to, just so I don't take that risk element. Essentially, something like that. You think that, because Because, by the way, if someone like Humanoid and Fnatic had thought about that in this final, they could have actually avoided getting picked off a few times. And if they'd have known the goal lead they had, they didn't need to even risk that. That risk gave the way back in to G2. And then the point I would say to Noah is a very simple one, which is this. I would say, bro, think about when you play against an Ezreal. It's the most annoying ADC champion, isn't it? You can never catch it. It's always dodging away, flash away, get away. Like, it could do the ult from halfway across the screen. The most frustrating thing about Ezreal is you can never get on top of him. So, bro, if you're playing and you're Eing in and you're melee range and people are still, you're doing it wrong. Like, bro, that you're playing, that's the dream when you're playing against the Ezreal, that he gives you himself. He just gives you a chance at free CC or to just kill him and blow him up. Normally that's the nightmare of playing. Like, if you think, like I'm saying, like of a classic Reckless game, the frustration of playing a Reckless is you feel like you're fucking Dal Sim from Street Fighter. You're stretching your arm all the way out and you can never quite get there. He's always just kiting backwards right at the edge of your like reach. Like, you're not doing that. You're actually playing into their hands if you're Noah in this situation. Like, that's where I do feel like people have got to stop looking at win rates of champions and look at the kit. Like, what does it do? Like, in this scenario, there's something wrong if you're getting caught like this, bro. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's one of, as an AD carry, you definitely feel, especially when you have that much goal in your hands, you definitely feel the pressure of, I can outdeal this guy. If I go in there, I land the full combo, maybe I one-shot the Corki,
Sure.
and then that wins my game, the team fight, right? So it's one thing to try to play passively, and is also probably a reflection of the state of the mind of the team. How panicked are they, or is this something where he has a composure issue, right? It could be a factor of things here. So if it is a composure issue from his perspective, then what you say definitely does apply. But if it feels that the team is generally feeling very panicked, it feels that that especially because it's game three, and you're already thrown twice at that point, right? You're going to game three. It feels that whatever plays on side lanes are just getting shut down. We're losing in fights. It's the pressure. The pressure gets to you, right? Everybody's been calling you a joker. This is my turn. It's my time to shine. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna one-shot Caps. I'm gonna take down the number one man, and I'm gonna prove all the haters wrong.
Right. That was the movie moment.
Subconsciously,
right. Yes.
Yeah, right.
That was basically the joke is that was Noah at the end of the Karate Kid, like. But then in this analogy, like I'm the secret coach, I'm the evil coach of the Cobra Kai, and I just tell Johnny, like, Johnny, what's the one way he could lose? As if that kid with the injured leg did the crane kick. So in my analogy, Thorin's special director's cut of Karate Kid, right? In my director's cut, they have a timeout, like, whoa, timeout. He goes over, then the Cobra Kai just listen, don't let him do the crane kick. So when he does the crane kick, we just run up, sweep the leg, stomp his fucking head, and that's it. The Karate Kid ends, and in my version, Johnny, aka I don't know, fucking Noah in this case. We win by just fucking record. I don't know. Come on, what was your point?
I mean, that's just where it is, right? It's a big finals moment. He tries to go for it. So to play defense for him a little bit there, that's problem.
By the way, what you're saying is a real factor. Like, one of the problems fans don't know is, just like people like me eventually sometimes become part of the feedback loop of what a player does and trying to prove you wrong. Definitely fan backlash does. And by the way, you've seen from Noah's tweets, he clearly does read all that shit and get bothered by it. I know what you mean. Like, basically, it's a really famous thing that actually sometimes people, like the aforementioned Reckless, sometimes if people just tell them 24/7, you play for KDA and you play safe, they'll have one game where they almost try to prove the opposite and, like, I don't know, play vain and like tumble into the enemy just to show, like, hey, I was doing the opposite. Even though I do think, by the way, that's another coaching concept. In theory, you don't want your players to be doing that, though. You don't want some bullshit that people said on Twitter to change what you're going to do in the game. Like, bro, play your game. I would even say that to Noah. Don't fucking listen to people on Twitter. If you really think something's best, you do it. Now, look, if they're wrong, you should be fired, but you should at least play your game. Don't do things to try and prove haters wrong. What the fuck is that? It's nonsense, right? See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.